Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. As always, I hope you are doing well. Before I get to today's show, I have two announcements for you. Firstly, my free sequencing masterclass is happening on November 22nd. This is online and available for anyone who teaches yoga. It's completely free. There are no strings attached. I feel like I haven't done enough online courses and workshops for you this year. That was a very conscious decision. I will be making up for lost time next year and bringing you all my workshops, my teacher trainings, including my pranayama teacher training, the 300-hour teacher training, and a whole bunch of other things. All of that will come to you next year. But because we haven't really done anything and got this year, I wanted to put us in an online sangha. So I'm offering this free sequencing masterclass on November 22nd, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. The link to sign up for this masterclass is available in my monthly newsletter. At the point of this recording, you would have already missed the September sign up, but it will be going out in October and November. The link to get on this list is in the show notes. It's there in this podcast description as well as my Instagram bio. The next time this link goes out is October 1st or 2nd, and then again on November 1st or 2nd. So please make sure you are on my monthly newsletter to get access to this free sequencing masterclass. My second update before we get to today's show is a little more technical. I've done over 160 episodes for this podcast, but for some reason in this one, my microphone switched off. So the audio quality from my end is not where I would like it to be. You might hear that in today's episode. I just want to call it out that we did have a technical issue. I have no idea why it switched off. Looks like as soon as I hit record, it's gone off. But it is still a wonderful episode, but it's not your usual listening experience. On the show today, I have Adam Husler. Adam is a yoga teacher based in the UK. I discovered Adam online a couple of years ago, and I have been following him since. And he's on the show today talking about teaching yoga, especially teaching yoga as a new yoga teacher. There is such healthy, wholesome, fresh perspective in this episode. So if you teach yoga in some capacity, you're a new teacher, you're an experienced yoga teacher, it doesn't matter. There's so much in here for you. Adam shares a lot of nuggets of his own experience and wisdom. And I think this type of perspective is missing in the modern yoga context. Usually it's very academic and it's very sequence related, but just this real raw conversation of what it means to teach yoga. So I'm really glad that Adam is here on the show today. Adam has extensive teaching experience. He's been teaching for a very long time. He does have a background in law, and that makes him question a lot of things. So he comes at it with that background, and he constantly asks why. And that self-inquiry has helped him build in a certain direction as a yoga teacher. He's taught extensively. He's taught in over 60 studios in 200 countries. He talks about that hustle phase in today's episode. He also hosts his own podcast called Honestly Unbalanced. He also has his own streaming platform, and he's just an all-round content creator for yoga. So I am so happy that Adam is on the show today. And you can follow Adam and learn more about his work. We've linked to everything in the show notes. Just look for letstalk.yoga/listen to get access to all of Adam's work. Here's our conversation with Adam Husler. Hi, Adam. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I have been following your content for a while, and we spoke about that when we connected last time. And I find you to be a very relatable yoga teacher, okay? Mainly because you make, at least on Instagram, you make me laugh and probably thousands and millions of other people laugh. And that's really not seen so common in the yoga world. Yoga teachers are, humor is not the first thing you think of, right? When you see a yoga teacher. So what I'm trying to get to here is, as a yoga teacher, how do you show up and be your own authentic self? Because for me personally, what has worked over the years is just to be myself. And so how can yoga teachers, new, experienced, tune into their own authentic frequency a little?
I think it depends what stage you're at in your teaching journey. I think when you're a brand new teacher, you don't quite have enough skill to be able to be yourself at the same time. I think if you're a new teacher, you should almost try and replicate your teacher. Because what you need to do is learn to hold the space and
Yes.
learn how to cue and learn to see poses and and just learn how to keep people safe. I would say maybe once you've taught a few hundred classes, maybe you should
Mhm.
start to think, okay, well, how can I actually be my own teacher? Because if all you are is a bad version of someone else or a less good version of someone else, you're never really going to have success, whatever success is. People
Mhm.
aren't going to resonate with you. The only reason they would go to you is because they want a yoga class at a
Mhm.
particular time, at a particular place, and they don't care who's teaching. At
Mhm.
some point, you need to actually bring your own magic into the teaching. And of
Mhm.
course, that leaves you open to some people not liking you.
Mhm.
Okay. But I would rather, for me at least, some people really resonate with me and
Mhm.
some people not,
Mhm.
than everyone to think, oh, he's okay. He's an,
Mhm. Mhm.
teacher. Yeah.
Something I tell new teachers and teachers in training is don't teach yoga to be liked. That's not
Mm,
where you show up to be liked. Uh, is just a job, and whether people like you or not is secondary. It's not even part of what we're focusing on. You spoke about new teachers, and that's really good perspective because when you're new, there is so much you have to do in class. So, what are some of the things a new teacher should focus on?
Can I just jump to what you said just before that?
Of
I'll come
course,
on to that
yes.
question about being liked and not liked. And there is a fine balance because if you're not liked by anyone, you can't really make yourself as a yoga teacher. You're not going to make money. If there's no one in
Mhm.
your class, you're not going to make a living of a yoga teacher. You need some people to like you. And you shouldn't go out your way to make people not like you. But certainly, I've seen teachers who are just desperate to be liked
Yeah.
and they lose a sense of who they are. They
Mm.
teach yoga in a way they don't particularly resonate with. Maybe they feel compelled to use pop music because they know that will make them more popular. And
Mhm.
equally as well, you shouldn't, I don't think at least, be trying to be friends with your students per se.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
That's not to say you shouldn't get to know them and get to know their life and have nice conversations with them. But I'm not looking to befriend students. I'm not looking to go for drinks with them afterwards. I think there is a line, and I don't think a teacher should put themselves on a pedestal.
Oh,
I
yes.
I would
Mhm.
I don't consider myself a guru. I don't want to see myself as above everyone.
Mhm.
All I do is I see myself as someone who knows more
Mhm.
about vinyasa yoga than they probably do.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's it. I don't think I'm a better person or a better human being. So I'm keen to do that. I want there to be separation, but
Mhm.
not hierarchy
Mhm.
in a
That's
sense.
no, I could not agree more because something I do and believe in very strongly is I my students are not my social circle.
Mm,
So do not interact with them socially. I have that, you call it a line, I call it a boundary. I know them. I will engage with them in my professional capacity. I've known them for years, but I will not go out for lunch or dinner or a movie with any of them. I don't even follow them on social media.
mm.
So to me, that is inside the studio. You want access to all of this, we engage in that context. That's my office. That's when I go
And
in.
you're in a big city, and I teach in a big city, so perhaps it is easier for us because when you leave a studio in a big city, you disappear. And I
Mm.
think it would be harder for teachers where you're teaching in a small local community,
Correct.
and you own the studio in a small place and everyone. So it is harder for some people, but I think where possible, it is still important to try and maintain it. But it is easier if you're in a city, I guess.
Yeah, and that's true. I've not really lived in a small town in a long time, so I cannot speak to that experience. But I think it's social media, right? Your digital boundaries. There's the physical boundary in the studio when class is over, everybody's gone. But I think it's the
Mm.
digital boundaries that I'm very aware of and how I interact. Like I don't reply to messages on weekends. And if something is specifically work, I send them to the work accounts because I'm like, hey, you know what? We have a social media person there who will answer this for you. I'm not going to at 11 p.m. tell you how to sign up. I don't say it like, but very gently, I will nudge them to that space. Because for me, it's difficult to maintain those boundaries if you just let everybody talk to you all the time. But it's me.
Agreed.
It's more me.
And in social media conversation, longer form conversations can start, which then consumes your time. Like my default on social media, if it's, as a student or like, unless it's something that is a quick answer or, oh yeah, I agree. If they're asking a deeper question, it will be email me
Yeah.
or chat, ideally chat to me at the end of class.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Find me in person. Let's have that conversation. It's more, and an email as well. Like if someone is asking something about a pose, to write it is so complex and nuanced and it's not that clear. And suddenly you've spent 20 minutes trying to make it make sense.
Yeah.
Whereas it could be in person, 10 seconds of, no,
Yes.
this is your shoulder. We want this to happen.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I usually say, just ask me next class, after class or before class. It's
Perfect.
going to be faster than explaining this to you on email. So no, I get that. So going back to what I was asking about earlier.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. It's meant to be on its own tangent, and a lot of this is open-ended. Is as a new teacher, if you could make a list of, say, 3 or 5 things. Now, I love lists and I work well with lists, but you don't have to stick to 3 or 5. What should a new teacher focus on? What will help them get the most mileage initially?
I say first, on the focus of lists, there's a book called The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. And he created the checklist for World Health Organization surgeons, like the checklist that they should complete before embarking on a surgery. The book is stunning. It's surprisingly emotional as well. So it's called The Checklist Manifesto.
Okay, I have it.
And his name is Atul Gawande. If anyone's into lists and checklists, he's an incredible guy. Anyway, so I was lucky when I started teaching in that I learned a set sequence. I wasn't actually taught how to sequence. That's good and bad. In the long run, I need to know how to sequence. But because I was taught a set sequence, and then I actually started teaching in a hot studio with a set sequence. It wasn't Bikram, but it was a set sequence. It meant that I could actually just focus on firstly seeing the room. And when I say see the room, that means not just being on the mat at the front doing the class or saying the names of poses. It means walking around, seeing what people are doing. How are your cues landing? And then in the next class, because it's a set sequence, you're teaching the same thing and you try different cues. Or you teach the same thing and you base yourself in a different place. If you're teaching something facing the long side of the mat, you might walk around to the side of the room and think, oh, okay, well, does that make more sense for people? So one thing I'd focus on is number one, don't change your sequence too much. Don't try and be creative. Just teach a pretty simple sequence, ideally multiple times.
Yes.
Try to then refine your cues and have some reflection on what cues seem to work, what anecdotes or metaphors seem to work for you, what landed. So that cueing. Then I would work on how you interact with individuals. So that could be if you see someone doing something, do you assist? I don't generally assist that much.
Me neither.
So it would be like, okay, what's better? Is it better to give a cue to that person, but to the whole room? As in, you see that person collapsing their shoulder in a variation of Ashistasana, and say, guys, make sure your shoulder hasn't collapsed. Or is it better to go to that person and kind of like whisper it to them? Jack, and draw the shoulder. So work out how to interact with individuals in a group setting. And then also in terms of demoing, another thing is work out when it is most appropriate to demo and when your demoing offers nothing. Because, when I first started teaching, I demo stuff in my body, and my body was young and loose, and I could stick my leg behind my head with no effort. That's irrelevant to the people in the room. There's no point me demoing because no one can do that.
Yeah.
And there's no point me demoing the second side of Warrior 2 because people know what Warrior 2 is. They've got it. They're seeing each other anyway. So why would I be doing it again? So understanding when demoing is useful and when it's superfluous.
No, that's a wonderful list. Thank you. So as I listen to you speak, you have a lot of clarity in how you're approaching this, right? I always tell teachers that the one thing you want to, and we spoke about this when we chatted, is you move from confusion to clarity. For me, that's one of the hallmarks of being a teacher or a student, is how do you get better at having this clarity?
I think the ultimate answer to most things like this is you do the thing more.
Mm.
You teach more.
Yeah.
And so many people are keen to do more and more trainings. I'm a 200-hour teacher, I'm a 500-hour teacher, I'm a 750-hour teacher. I can teach vinyasa and rocket and ashtanga and yin and whatever. I
Mhm.
think the key is just teach more yoga
Mhm.
and also be analytical of how you teach. So I just said all those things a new teacher might do, but I think an experienced teacher should do it as well. Be
Yeah.
reflective. Okay, and less people are coming to class. What could that be? Is it because I've stopped playing a certain type of music? Is it because I've stopped doing kind of my Dharma talks at the beginning? Or are there less people coming now because I am doing Dharma talks and that's not what they want? You know, that's not what they want from their vinyasa classes. But I think one should always be self-reflective.
Mhm.
But even if you're not that reflective, just teaching more will make you more competent as a teacher.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's
Uh,
not to say one shouldn't do trainings, but prioritize the act of teaching yoga if you want to be a skillful teacher, as you would in any other discipline. If you wanted to be really good at chess, let's say, you wouldn't just read books on chess,
to
you would play a lot of chess.
Mhm. Mhm. No, I think that's really an important thing. Go teach more of it. A couple of things I want to go back to. One is I didn't learn a lot of sequencing in my trainings either. I had to spend a lot of time figuring it out, and it took me a lot of work early on, but now it's actually paying off. It set a foundation. So I think there is merit to a little bit of training, a good amount of training, but then you've got to try and apply what you've learned.
Mm.
So I agree with that. There are two things there that you said in passing that I want to pause on. Teach a lot, right? Teach a lot. But there are two practices I personally use for myself, and I think it's really important to bring up, is before class, do something that grounds you. Before you teach, do something that grounds you. After you teach, you have to reflect. Like that grounding pre-teaching, reflecting after teaching, if that becomes somewhat of a practice over time, then you've got more to do.
What kind of stuff grounds you before you teach?
What grounds me? Well, depends on the day. Okay.
Mm.
A day. But some when I'm driving to the studio, right? I use that time to really go over, and I've taught 6 days a week for a very long time. So for me, I need shorter windows of prep at this point. So I spend my drive 10, 12 minutes just planning my classes. And I teach at my own studio, so I know
Does
who's
does your car insurer know this? Know that you're doing all these things in your head?
it's one road, nobody's on it. I live close to the studio. There's no traffic. I could so there's that. Or when I arrive in class and we do that silent seat, to me that's the most important moment
Mm.
where I notice who's there. I close my eyes. There is this 2-3 minutes of just, and then I don't see anything else except who's in front of me for the next hour. And then on the way out, I sweep that room. And that's my favorite moment of just going over, oh, this one was struggling with that. Did I address that? Oh, their back was hurting last time. Did I go back to that? So it's my mental checklist. And then I reflect on myself in a very gentle way, sometimes in a funny way, sometimes it's harsh. It depends. But to me, then when I leave and by the time I drive back home, I've let the class go. I've done my
Mm.
reflection. I've made my mental notes. Sometimes it's a physical note on my phone. And it takes a lot shorter time now for me, but I don't just check out right after class. I spend that little moment in my head and then back the next day. And that's just ground, reflect, ground, reflect. And it's effortless at this point.
I think all new teachers should do that as much as possible. But one tip I would have
Mm-hmm.
for new teachers, for experienced teachers, is at the beginning of class, you know, don't have everyone looking at you at the beginning until you're very comfortable. So
Mm-hmm.
I personally, do a bit of an intro. Today we're working on this, yada yada.
Yeah.
But then when it gets to the beginning class, to help myself get centered as well,
Mm-hmm.
I would typically start a class in Shavasana, in Balasana,
Mm-hmm.
mm, probably not face down. That would be unusual. but one of those two poses, typically, maybe even Sukhasana with eyes closed, because then you actually just get to stand, see the room, see who's there, kind of work out where everyone is. No one's looking at you. There's less pressure, and it lets you be in the space. And probably for the first 10 minutes of class, people are in poses where they can't really see me.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And that just, again, helps me feel the room, get into the zone. And I think another little tip for new teachers is if at any point you're feeling flustered, put people in one of those poses where they're not looking at you. Downward dog. Whatever. That works well.
I make a lot of jokes about put people in down dog and then roll your eyes and take your few breaths and whatever else you need to do. But I use that same approach, not just for the teacher, but I actually use it more for the student. I run beginner classes very regularly, like these beginner series, and I always start them off on their hands and knees and where they're not looking at me, at least for the next, say, 5 or 7 minutes. And even if it's brief and they're back and they're grounding and it's not eye contact or I'm okay with it. But it sometimes engages the student like it's too much too soon. So slowly ease them into it. So I think that's actually a really important tip for new teachers. Speaking of new teachers, what's your take on asking feedback from students?
I don't want feedback from students.
Okay.
So the reason being is I don't want feedback of anyone particularly. The only person I would want feedback from is someone whose knowledge and experience I highly respect and that aligns with me. So if an LA West Coast, whatever it is, power yoga teacher comes to my class, I'm probably not going to really care too much about their feedback. They've got a different belief set of me.
Fair.
If like one of my teachers, if like the late Michael Stone came to my class, if Jason Quandau came to my class, if people I work with, like Mia Toga, Michael Wong came to my class and gave me feedback, yeah, I'd listen to them and I'd take it on board. Or, if a long-term student came and gave feedback, being like, Adam, you seem like you're angry this week or the last few weeks. Maybe, someone who's seen me that much, fine. But generally speaking, feedback is so loaded based on that individual's experience. Like when I first started teaching, some people said to me, oh my God, that's the best class I've ever been to. It wasn't. Of course it wasn't. But they were just having a really nice day. And maybe at the time I looked young and healthy and fresh and whatever. There was all the good vibes, and maybe that's what made them feel happy. And it wasn't a good class. So I think generally take good and bad feedback with a pinch of salt. If you've got any kind of like online feedback system, never look at it. As a teacher, don't look at what anyone wrote about your class, because it will be so loaded and actually really irrelevant. And it's the people that were probably the angriest.
Oh, yeah.
That wrote the stuff. So my view is the only feedback I would listen to from the people I haven't already said was the collective feedback. Like if my numbers are constantly going down and there hasn't been any other external change like price, etc., and it's been going down over 6 months, then maybe that is a bit of feedback I'd listen to. Or if the feedback is purely like all the class said that music was way too loud. Yeah, fine. But someone said to me not that long ago, you played a song in class, and I don't think that song's appropriate for yoga. I was like, okay. And then they wanted to talk more. They're like, oh no, it's really like, it's riveting, blah, blah, blah. It repeats, it's looping. And I was like, okay, well, that's your view and that's fine. But it's a song, it's what I've chosen. And they wanted more. And then I said, look, you've been to my class for multiple times in the last 6 months. It's the same playlist. You've heard that song so many times. It just so happened to be that on this particular day, with how you're feeling, etc., you've pinpointed on it and it's affected you in a certain way. And that kind of ended the conversation a little bit. So yes, I would say personally, don't really listen to feedback in a general sense. And of course, there's exceptions. Like if someone says, what you said was racist, and listen to that feedback. That's probably useful. But like on a more general level, I'd ignore it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now it's something I've noticed more in America. Because I remember when I lived in India, teachers wouldn't end class with And if there's anything I can do to make it better, let me know.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no, it's very common up here. And so I just sit there and be like, for me, because the teacher is the expert in the room, right? It's like me going to somebody's office and giving them feedback on this computer program thing that they do that I have no idea about.
Exactly, yeah.
Just because I use Amazon doesn't mean I can give them feedback on how to run some systems in their thing. So anyway, that's because Amazon is headquartered here.
And the issues as well is so many people are qualified teachers. And what does that mean? That could mean you've gone to Go for 3 weeks. It could be that you have been teaching 10 classes a week for the last decade. What does it mean to be a qualified teacher? And that's what I found, actually. The people who have the biggest desire to come up to me at the end of the class and give me feedback are people that are like newly qualified teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting. Yeah, they're the ones that want their voice to be heard the most.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I've always discouraged it. Like I've discouraged teachers from asking feedback like that in class because they don't really know how to. You're the yoga expert in that moment, and if you really want feedback, go to somebody who's above you in your journey.
In your lineage, yeah. But and also if you ask if people have feedback, you're setting yourself up for failure because inevitably you ignore it. If someone says, actually, you're doing too many chaturangas, there needs to be less.
Personally.
But then the next week, you do that many chaturangas. Or if someone says, you know what, the sun salutations, they're a bit too much. Mm-hmm. I think you should leave sun salutations out of any class. Mm-hmm. And then next week you teach them, that means you've ignored that feedback. Mm-hmm. I just think there is, generally speaking, no need. What you might reframe it as, and I do this at the end of class, I say, guys, any questions, come to ask me. But then they can say, actually, there was loads of chaturangas. Why? And I'm like, okay, well, that's because we were working towards a particular arm balance. Yeah. And in that arm balance, chaturanga is the base. So it's important that you practice that. So I'm more than happy to take questions, but not feedback.
I do a wish list before class. Is there anything on your wish list today? And I'm trying to see what's going on in their bodies and their heads usually when I ask for that. So it's wish list at the start, questions at the end. And I don't just ask for questions. I ask for jokes. I ask for humor, comments, sarcasm.
What's in the wish list? Is that wish list that they're like putting their hands up or they're writing it down?
Oh, no, that's just before class when everybody's sitting and we're all looking at each other. And people arrive early usually. So I talk to them about something about yoga, right? I'm trying to give them some context about yoga. And I always ask, is there anything on your wish list? By that, I mean, some people will say, my lower back feels very stiff, or I'm stiff in my shoulders, or, we worked on that pose. Can we do that again? Pigeon feels great for me. So I'm trying to see, you're tight in your hips. Oh, okay, your lower back's troubling you. Some people are just like, I want to do Shavasana the whole. So I'm gauging the room a little bit. And that's one side. The second side is I want them to verbalize what's going on. How attentive are you? The new students will not say anything, but over time, some of the more experienced ones will. So I'm trying to see how aware or that journey of awareness in them. Not everybody will talk. Some will. But it's a way of just engaging class, getting them out of their heads a little bit.
Can I play devil's advocate there slightly? So you know your community and you know what works best for you, and of course. But what I would say to teachers listening, especially the newer teachers, is number one, if you're newer, it's hard for you to hold space a little bit. It's intimidating and you might feel judged. Mm-hmm. The best way to grasp, especially you're a cover teacher, the best way to take control of the class is by going in and saying, today we are working on this. End of story. Because then as a cover teacher, the students will think, oh, they know what they're talking about. Yeah. And the other benefit of that is you are taking charge, and it's not like a free fall. You are saying, this is what we're working on, end of story. I've planned this. I know what I'm doing. And then when you continue teaching, they will listen to you a little bit more. They'll be compelled to listen to you. Sometimes if a teacher says, and again, if I was in your room, and I know your experience, but if I was in a class I didn't know and a teacher says, guys, what do you fancy doing today? My heart would almost think, oh, well, you haven't planned anything. You're just going to make it up as you go along. Or, and it's always going to be the loudest person in the room. It's like, I want to work on handstand.
Mhm.
And everyone else is quiet. So it'd always just be doing what the loudest person wants.
Okay.
Uh,
No,
so
I have to tell you, it's not like I do what they ask. I mean, sometimes I don't do anything that they ask for. And I also tell them that I have my list. It's not like I'm winging it. I'm trying to see what's going on.
I didn't mean it was you for you, because I know you know what you're
I
doing.
know.
It's more just a new teacher doing that. I think doing that blindly. I think it just needs to be they need to really reflect on how they're doing it and motivation.
And it's something, at least I call out, right? Sometimes my own students who come into teacher training will be like, oh, but Aru, you asked this. What if somebody says we want to work on this and I'm not ready to work on that? And that's why I say you don't have to ask it. I didn't ask it my first 5 years. I was just, this is what we're doing. I'm not saying anything. We're just going to do this. So it is experience versus being.
Of course, yeah. And as you said, like as an experienced teacher, if someone said to you, I want to work on 8 angle, you could probably, with 10 minutes of just kind of getting your head around it, you could create a really good sequence working towards Ashtavikalasana easily. Whereas, someone in their first 1,000 classes really probably should spend an hour at least working out what that sequence is. But the more experience you get, the less you need that. You could probably teach a 2-hour workshop on a pose without needing to plan it at all.
I think for a new teacher, right, Adam, it is preparation is key. And preparation, repetition. And I think sometimes new teachers, I like to keep things simple, basic, work on your foundations, teach what you can teach in your sleep really well or do really well in your sleep. And to repeat it, I always tell new teachers, like one sequence, teach that for a few weeks and then swap a few things out and then put something new. So swap 20% out after a couple of weeks. And then
be ever evolving.
Yeah. And then you slowly try to add things in, and that dialogue between you and the student is constant. But how do teachers navigate FOMO? Because I started way back before social media and 20 million things informing you every minute. So I did not have the distractions that a lot of teachers have today. So it was really, I just worked with what was in front of me. How do teachers respond to FOMO?
Fear of missing out in what sense? Fear of missing out on teaching all the poses or what?
Fear of missing out in terms of just understanding what success in yoga looks like, right? A lot of people think full classes, big numbers, fancy sequences. The harder the pose, the more engaged.
Yeah.
So I came before the age of social media. So I don't relate to it as much, but it's a real thing for a lot of people.
But there's so many layers and so many angles we could go at that. That could be like I could do probably an hour-long monologue on that question. The first thing I would say is, let's say in terms of seeing other teachers' success, fear of missing out in that sense. Remember, when you see anything on social media or you see classes that are full, don't just be jealous of the full class. You need to equally be jealous of all of the work, blood and sweat and tears that have gone into creating that. And we probably don't want that. Like, if you looked at my social media 6 years ago, I was in different country every weekend teaching. I was doing amazing poses, but I wouldn't stop teaching for 200 days. I had relationships break down because I was never around and I was constantly kind of on the road traveling. I barely slept. I lost all of my muscle that I'd worked for years to gain. And now I was like just some skinny yoga teacher. Would I pay that again? I'm not sure. So I think if you're ever going to be jealous, know that there's a lot more under the surface. And you have to if you're going to be jealous of the whole package, not just the cherries on the cake, as it were. That's one thing I would say. I think it's also important to understand what you want from teaching yoga. Like, are you teaching yoga because it's something you gained a lot from and want to share that, and you don't want it to be an income? You don't need it to be a big income for you. Maybe you've got a wealthy partner, or maybe you've got another job that you love. So in that sense, yeah, it's fine. Don't put the work in. Actually, in terms of putting the work in, so I put out a social media post the other day saying, these are the things I would look for if I was a studio owner from
I
prospective
saw that.
teachers. And it included, and I said, this is a hypothetical studio. It's not real. But I included things like I would want the teachers to be doing more for the yoga community than just turning up and teaching classes. I would
Mhm.
love to see that they are podcasting or doing some social media bits or they're writing or like. I said I'd want if a teacher had their own website and like an email address that wasn't like jackie@gmail.com, then
Mhm.
I'd probably think they were taking it a little bit more seriously. And I would say 95% of the people who responded to that were like, oh my God, yeah, you're right. Yeah, awesome. But a few were like, oh, that is so elite. What was it? Yeah,
Because,
elitive. Yeah, elitist, saying that people need a website. And it was just
oh, it's basic.
the people that were responding negatively were all those people, to some degree, they just didn't want to put the work in. They didn't want to go to a studio before they applied. They just wanted to be able to apply. They didn't want to have a website. Even though you can get a website for literally £1 a month. I forget it now, but there's a platform. It's really basic website. It's £1 a month. Like not everyone can afford it, but most people could afford it. Uh, there's, it's not a big ask to expect that someone that wants a career from something to put some work in outside of the act of physically teaching. Uh, and also, as a side note, to acknowledge that probably the worst way to make money as a teacher is to teach public classes. It depends, there's variations. Like if you're teaching in a massive studio and you get paid per person, yeah, maybe it's good. But generally speaking, but you teach in a studio for different reasons. You teach in a studio because you might get clients from that, you might get people on your retreats from that. It's a good way to practice because these people really want to learn yoga. Whereas in a gym, they just want to do some stretching often.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it's lovely to teach a really dedicated group of students. There's so many benefits of teaching in a studio. You don't have to do anything except turn up and teach. You
Yeah.
don't have to pay for music licensing or be concerned about renting the space
Marketing.
and not making the money. You just turn up and teach.
Yeah.
I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent there,
Oh, no, I
but
love it. Go for it.
I think, yeah. So in terms of fear of missing out, you need to, if you're ever jealous, you need to take in the whole package and acknowledge that the people that have had success have probably put a lot of work in various and I've probably made a lot of sacrifices.
Yeah.
That
Wonderful.
doesn't mean they're always happy though.
Mhm.
Okay. Like when I was teaching the most around the world, I wasn't happy particularly. I wasn't depressed, but I wasn't happy. I
Mhm.
was just constantly on the go.
Mhm.
Uh, so I think that's always something just to always consider and bear in mind and understand your why.
Mhm.
Why are you even teaching yoga in the first place? What do you need yoga to provide from you financially, if anything? All
Mhm.
these questions you should ask yourself.
Mhm. That what is your why, I think, is so important. And I don't think it's asked often enough. I feel like there is this new generation of yoga teachers who ask it. But it has not been asked. If I look back 10 years ago, or even 6, 7 years ago, it was not a conversation that was being had. Even the fact that you were talking about burnout and being miserable, right? I'm very open about the fact that I've been in multiple periods of burnout and I'm not proud of it. Uh, but I had that phase. I don't go back there as much anymore. But to build to where I had to get to, I went through that phase. And now I want other younger teachers like, hey, don't do it. It's not worth it. This is what is involved. There's a better way. But it's not a conversation that a lot of people have openly.
Agree. I was just thinking at the same time, some of the teachers are like, oh, it's not worth it. And then they do no work, but expect the same results.
Oh, yeah.
There was that. But I agree, one should look after oneself. And to be honest, I don't know what exposed me to the question why. It might be because my training initially was law. I'd studied law at university.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
it's very analytical. I was supposed to be a lawyer. It was a top university for law in the UK. And so that made me very analytical. So, at the very beginning, when I saw people going into like extreme poses, I would start to think like, what is the intention there?
Mhm.
What are they actually stretching? What are they engaging? Are they going into passive flexibility? All of these things I was thinking about very early on. And
Mhm.
then like 5, 6 years later, there was lots of conversation on hypermobility and stuff. But I think I just been exposed to the analytical mindset, and that was
Okay.
something I did from the very beginning. In
Okay.
each pose I taught, in each cue, in Baddha open the feet like the page of the book. Why? We're just pulling on ligaments. What are we doing when we're doing that? So those questions came to me quite early.
I'm laughing because of the Baddha Konasana comment, but I don't have an analytical mind. I am an artist, a creative. I've been a dancer my whole life. So for me, I had to teach myself a lot of this later. I come at it with a very creative approach and use my heart over my head a lot more. But something my teacher once said when I was still living in India, when it came to a conversation around advanced forces, and in his own way, with his broken English, he said something that was, it's like, would you eat a 7-course meal every single day of your life? And all of us were like, no.
I probably would, to be fair. I probably would if I could.
So we were like, no. And so he's like, that's the thing. There are seasons for it. There are seasons where you push and you work on your advanced poses, but that's not your everyday practice. Your everyday practice is your X, Y, and Z and your fundamentals and all of that. But that one little 2-3 line conversation that we had stuck with me. And grounded me in many ways. There were many small things he said that grounded me. But yeah, that's my tangent.
That's a lovely idea of seasons. We had a guest on our podcast who talked about that in relation to her life, and she just said she has seasons. This is the season where I'm an ultra marathon runner, and this is the season where I'm a new mom, and that's the focus. And I think it can be nice to segment your priorities in that way. I mean, like, right now, this is my focus. And actually, we had another guest on who had a really interesting idea, like a high-performing lawyer / yoga teacher / mom / author. And she wrote a book called, I forget the name of the book, but what it was to do is you would, shifting the dials. The book was called Shifting the Dials. And she would say you divide life up into kind of work, personal passion, family, etc. And you would acknowledge at each season of your life, we'll call it, I'm shifting up the family dial, but I'm turning down the work dial. And do it very consciously. We'll be like, okay, well, I'm applying for a new job, so I'm shifting at work, and then everything else has to shift down significantly. And actually, she would be very vocal with her family, be like, parents, love you, but for now, I'm turning you down. And that's a nice way to think of it. However, that is also quite selfish in terms of broad life. Not in yoga, forget yoga for a second, but you might end up in a position where you're never in family at the same time as your partner. So I think one has to, in one moment, look after oneself, but at the same time, acknowledge that we are more than ourselves. We are a collective, we are one, however you want to look at it. We are a community, and we look after each other. And that's the greatest gift that being a dad has given to me. I've always talked about that. But to have someone who is 100%, 100 million% more important than you in your life, that changes everything. Even though it's something I've taught for years, that we are not the most important thing. But having someone that clearly is more important than you is very good, very grounding.
No, I enjoy listening to that. It is, I think, something else that you've been saying a couple of times on this conversation is you referenced a couple of books, right? And something I think yoga teachers need to do is, especially when they come into trainings, be like, oh, where's your reading list? I don't give them a reading list. Okay. Because I'm also trying to subtly message that yoga is not about just consuming more. It's really about absorbing and reflecting and executing in a certain capacity. Anyway, so something I tell yoga teachers is don't just read yoga books, read other books, keep other interests, have a life outside of your yoga teachers and yoga community and yoga circle and yoga. Have the other side, because then you are not just stuck in this space all the time. And I think that's something that is needed for new and more so experienced teachers. I think experienced teachers over a period of time, they get it, but is to have what I call office hours, where you prep for class, where you do what you need to do, and then you close and you don't come back till you've set another time to come back to it. There's no question there. But
no, I think everyone should read more. I think if you're in a relationship if you're going to be in a relationship with someone that don't read, you shouldn't get in a relationship with them. We need to train society to read more, like 100%. So I think on our training, the reading list really, it was just some key texts, like the Bhagavad Gita, etc. The key stuff.
I
But
give them at the end of the training.
There's lots of stuff that I would advise in like later trainings or mentor programs. Lots of books that I would want people to think about or read or get synopsises of. But I think just reading in general just allows you to interact with the world better, and it takes you outside of the yoga bubble and makes you realize that yoga is something that can be integrated into life. We are not just yogis who meet other yogis that read books about yoga or Buddhism or crystals. We are actually interacting with the world around us. We are reading like Albert Camus and applying yoga philosophy to an understanding to what happens in the best. And they're like, yeah.
No, and it makes us more tolerant and more compassionate.
And I just hope my child reads more. I think it's so to read, and men are quite bad at it actually. Men tend to not read fiction. Men sweeping generalization. There's lots of men.
I think my husband, he doesn't read as much as I read.
But like I always try and have at any point in time a fiction book and a non-fiction book on the go. Generally for fiction, I don't want it to be depressing. Like life can be hard enough.
That you can turn on the news.
Like I read a recent one, which a Japanese book. Like everything is, I don't know the exact title, but it's everything that you need can be found in the library or something along those lines. And just beautiful and lets you actually get into the lives of people in a very intimate way. And if all you do is watch, 90-minute movies or see the horrors on news entertainment, you don't get that. I think for empathy and compassion and understanding lives, and then that book, books are great, and then that helps us actually hold space for students because we realize not everyone is living the same life as us. We understand all the different situations one could be going through. So I just think reading full stop is so important. And if I could take one device or one object to an island, it's my Kindle, 100%. My Kindle's with me all that. I would love to be able to just read paper books. But, I'll put it in my bag and by the end of 2 days, it's ruined and it's covered in water and protein shake. And the benefit of Kindle as well, of course, is you can highlight things. And I've got wonderful apps on my phone that integrate with Kindle. And every day it will send me 10 of my highlights, which is great.
I'm a paper and pen person, and this is how I highlight all my stuff.
And I think that's wonderful. If you have a system like that, it's wonderful. But I just like to be able to go on my computer, that book I read 5 years ago. Let me click on it, and I can see immediately everything I highlighted in it in one page.
Yeah,
that's me being efficient.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm just poking fun at your highlight system versus mine. People listening to this on audio won't see these color marks. Anyway, there's something you said earlier that I just want to quickly touch on. You said how something about yoga teachers, we're talking about the websites, and it's look at who is podcasting, who is blogging. I think that's a really significant point because I know we went in a different direction after that, but I want to go back to it because it's something I tell people who want to study yoga or do teacher trainings. And I believe teacher trainings are not just to teach yoga. You learn it for yourself.
Yeah.
And I always say you have to pick a lead trainer who you are 100% sure is invested in you and is invested in yoga. And the way you check that is not if they've only taught these classes. And it's not a ding if you've only taught classes, but go after the teachers who are blogging, who are podcasting, who are in events, who are having conversations, who are creating content, because then there is a hunger there and a certain intensity with which they're absorbed. And also look at the evolution of thought in yoga. Like their own evolution is out there, it's on print. And you pick your teachers like that in many ways.
And those teachers are giving something back as well. They're actually giving something back to the yoga community.
Yeah.
Like podcasts. I've spent thousands of pounds on
Oh,
equipment and
yes.
subscriptions and stuff.
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't directly make me money particularly,
Mhm.
but I'm trying. Part of it is yes to increase awareness and a bit of marketing,
Yeah.
but mainly it's give something back, like offering lovely conversations to the world.
Mhm.
No, I
Mhm.
don't think the reality is any studio has ever given me a job because oh you've got a podcast, great, but it's me giving back.
No, I hear you, and I think it's my YouTube channel and this podcast is my way of service, is to
Mm.
give it back and to leave it for whenever it want, however long it needs to be here. So I think that's uh, a very significant marker for students to consider, for teachers to consider, especially in today's world where now you have yoga mentors. Adam, when I started and I moved to a different country, right? So I didn't know anything about running a business. I didn't even want a business. All I knew was I wanted to teach yoga. But nowadays you can reach out for help and get a mentor and get into a virtual room with somebody and have conversation and ask for support. 12, 13 years ago, this was not an option, at least in my circles. So, how can students ask for support? How do they recognize they need support?
I think all of us need it to some degree. Again, it depends on what stage you're at and the gaps that you identify. Like, if you're a new teacher, you probably don't need that much support. You just carry on and practice teaching.
Mhm.
But it comes where you notice that you need growth and you're not sure how to get there. I think that's a time where you really identify you need support. Uh, I think the first port of call often should be the teachers that have trained you so far to some degree. Like I will sometimes get people, and this sounds a bit nasty of me, but they'll like ask me really deep questions about like sequencing or it's like I've never met you.
Yeah,
You've not given anything to me.
yeah.
Uh and you're asking for my time. Like, why haven't you asked that to your teachers and your teacher trainers or the teachers you go to class with? And I've had that quite a lot over the years. And part of me thinks, oh, it's lovely that they're asking me, but also, and I've been burnt a little bit in the past. I had one teacher that just moved to, I think actually she had just moved from India to London and she followed me on social media. This is years ago. And she said to me, can I meet you and get some support from you and get some
I always
advice
say no.
and this is a long time ago. And I just thought, okay, well, yeah, she came to my class and I spent an hour and a half giving her advice, etc. And she never came back to my class.
Ooh,
She,
freeloader. Okay.
and that kind of, I've had that multiple times, if someone has asked me for advice, I've given them advice and then I've barely seen them again,
Mhm.
ever. And there was one, so sometimes they acknowledge you, like one that I never saw again. I
Mhm.
heard her on a podcast and she actually said, oh, yeah, and Adam Husler gave me some great advice. The advice was useful. It wasn't, it
Okay.
wasn't
She could have
useful,
told you.
but there was just no exchange. So my view is if you're going to ask a teacher for advice, a senior teacher, it either is someone whose class you go to
Mm.
and you're asking it as part of their class, you're asking it as a student,
Mhm.
okay, or it's in the context of like a paid relationship. Like I have an level up online mentor coaching program,
Mhm.
and in that sense, I'm not. It's financial exchange. They're paying me for my advice and
No, I
mentoring.
think
I think that's
that's
fine.
a balanced exchange.
Yeah,
I always tell people, come see me. I have people who live 2 miles away who will never come to the studio, but will want, teachers will want help. And I'm like, come to the studio, we'll talk. Come
yeah.
to class, we'll talk. Over the years, I've gotten better at it. Yeah. So as we wrap up, I want to be mindful of how late it is getting for you. What is your biggest mindset shift that happened from Adam, the new teacher, to who you are today, the teacher?
It's a gradual one, but I was brought up in a Irish Catholic background.
Hmm.
Okay, so I don't know if you know a lot about Irish Catholics, but there's lots of guilt. Like you need to work hard, you need to provide, and if you are not providing and working hard, you should feel guilty for that. So, the moment that I started teaching, I was lucky that I had a space. I was managing this big space,
I
so
love
I could, yeah, so I could, without paying any money, do my own classes. But I was managing this space, which was maybe like a 6 hour a week job, teaching 10 classes for a studio, and then maybe teaching five more classes in the space. obscene, crazy. And I started just teaching this obscene amount of classes. And then I'd teaching more and more, then up to 26 classes a week. So really extreme. And actually, I was suffering myself,
Mm-hmm.
just in terms of time, being tired and not doing the stuff I wanted to do. But I made sacrifices in hindsight I wish I hadn't made. So relationships a little bit. But the biggest one, my dad, he had cancer on and off. Then he had terminal cancer. And I didn't ring him enough. I loved him so much. He's an amazing dad. But in that final period, I didn't ring him enough. I didn't say, actually, let's just drop my classes and let's just go on a final holiday. Uh, because I thought, oh, I'll lose my classes or I'll lose my students. And even when he was on his deathbed, I had a retreat booked for, not retreat, sorry, a workshop booked for Spain. And everyone said to me, oh, he'd want you to go. Like, he wasn't really conscious at that point. And I went. And at the end of the workshop, I saw on my phone someone text saying, sorry for your loss.
Sorry.
And I shouldn't have got that text. Obviously, I was stupid as a person to send that kind of text. But I just thought it was a workshop for 15 people, 20 people in Spain that I'll never see again. Why did I bother? So now I still work hard. Like today, I've recorded 3 podcasts. I've taught 2 classes online in the studio. I've done lots, and actually even today, I haven't really done all the things that I'd want to do for myself. And I'm behind on work in terms of all the other things I could be doing. Uh, but I'm better at thinking, look, it's a special moment. Just get the class covered. I'm better at thinking, you know what? I just don't want, I'm not saying yes to everything anymore. I just
Yeah.
don't want to do that thing. You're not paying me enough. Okay. Or it's just not a really good value exchange. Or I'm going to do an event and yes, you're going to give me something worth 30 quid, but I don't want it.
Yeah.
So I'm better at saying no to things.
You
I'm
value
better at
things.
actually knowing that life is finite, which of course, as you get older, you know that life is, I've always acknowledge that. I used to be quite into stoicism,
Mhm.
uh, and the idea of having, I almost got tattooed like a skull on me. The
Okay.
idea, like a memento mori, the idea that just a reminder that you're going to die and you're more. I didn't get that tattoo. Thank God, I've got no tattoos. But there was a moment in my like teens where I thought about getting that. So I've always been quite sensitive to that. But even more so now, and having a little boy and just seeing
Yeah.
how quickly
It's
time
shift.
goes, just
Hmm.
everything just flies by. I'm just trying to really make the most of my life as best I can now. So that's the biggest shift, is saying no to work or saying no to opportunities in inverted commas.
Hmm. Hmm. No, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I will link to everything, your Honestly Unbalanced podcast, and all that you do, all your courses, everything in our show notes. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you so much.
As always, thank you so much for listening. Everything mentioned is linked at letstalk.yoga/listen. I will see you next week with a brand new guest and a new conversation. Until then, remember to rate and review the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I will see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.